You're welcome back. It's still Daybreak here on Trust TV, and we're back. We're still talking about Workers' Day. And before we went on break, we're looking at the mental health aspect of workers, the Nigerian workers, what they go through, their mental health, and all that it entails. This time around, we're going to be touching on the fundamental rights of workers. Now, during our discussion segments, we gave a touch on that where we spoke about how exploitation is having its field day in both the formal and the informal sectors when it pertains to workers. And I also, made mention of a couple, laying emphasis on the fact that I am not a legal practitioner. So joining us this morning, we have a legal practitioner. We have Barrister Mutiu Akinsanya, who is a legal practitioner. I'll be talking about the existing laws that are available to regulate and ensure that the rights of workers are being safeguarded. Thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, and happy Workers' Day to all of us.
Yeah, to all of us.
Yeah.
All right. We know there are existing laws, but the question is, how effective are these existing laws that safeguards the rights of workers?
Yeah, so the laws are there, but they're not very effective, and that's the major reason why most Nigerian workers are being exploited, from discrimination against workers to not even allowing workers to have a say in the workplace. Because it's only when workers have a say that they can even complain about the things that disturb or worries them within those workplaces. So if you look at the Constitution has provisions for fundamental rights, not limited to workers, fundamental rights that everybody should enjoy. But workers should also particularly enjoy those rights. The freedom of association is embedded in the Constitution. We have the Trade Unions Act, too, that also allows workers to be able to form themselves into associations and make agitations for themselves. And of course, if workers will make agitations, they will only make agitations that are contained in our laws. You have the provision of the Constitution that prohibits discrimination against persons because of their gender, because of their color, and so on and so forth. But all of that we find in our workplaces. Workers have the right to equal pay, and that's really a big problem in Nigeria. There is a huge disparity when it comes to where people work and how they work. So these are really very great issues. You also have issues of exploitation of Nigerian workers, like you said. We still have casual workers here and there. You have very big companies out there that hire staffs for big corporations, financial institutions, and those workers are being shortchanged. Yeah. You have somebody somewhere that collects huge money and gives them peanuts. So it becomes very difficult really for the Nigerian worker to be able to exist and sustain his or herself and even members of their families. So these laws are there, but the implementation is still far, far away from where we should be.
All right. Someone said something during our phone-in segment. He said, sometimes you don't even have the right to sue. How true is that? What should Nigerian workers know about their rights, especially when it comes to holding their employees accountable?
Every Nigerian worker has the right to complain. There is nowhere in the law that says a Nigerian worker cannot complain. And the freedom of association, like I said, is embedded in the Constitution. So workers are allowed to form associations where they can clamor for their welfare and for their benefits. So workers can always come together, they can always speak. But what becomes important is that for workers or for employees, they must know that there should be a contract at the beginning of the engagement, particularly for those who are in the private sector. If you're being engaged by any organization, what binds you and that organization is either your employment letter or a document that specifies your engagement with your employer.
In that employment letter, what are those clauses to look out for that signifies or shows exploitation legally or ethically?
So where the work hours, for instance, are really beyond what anybody can manage, it can be exploitative, where one is also expected to work so much with little pay. No doubt it becomes exploitative, where there's a clause, for instance, that says the employee cannot be a member of any association, it also becomes exploitative, because that's in the bid to want to shut the employee or the associates of the employees from speaking. And so what one will always expect in a letter of engagement, particularly for those in the private sector, is that that letter of engagement should be able to state categorically what is expected from the employee, and should also be able to state what are those benefits that the employee also looks to benefit. And you see, in Nigeria, there are several laws that state specifically what employees should enjoy, from contributing pension, because we have the pension laws, particularly the Pension Act, that now allows for contributory pension. So anybody who works in an organization should have something he or she will fall back to when he or she is retired. And unfortunately, you have so many organizations today that will deduct what they should deduct from their employee, but they don't even remit to the appropriate authorities. You have also issues around healthcare. The National Health Insurance Authority Act that also allows for workers to be able to access healthcare, either free of charge or with payment of certain percentage. But what becomes obvious within our society is that these laws are there, but where are even these health facilities for these workers to access? You have also the National Housing Fund. About 2.5% is deducted from workers' salary and paid into the National Housing Fund. But the question is, how many Nigerian workers have been able to access shelter, housing in so many years back? You still have so many Nigerian workers who are still paying house rent to the elites or to the bourgeoisies in our society. Yeah, and so these laws are there. Implementing this law has been a huge challenge. And I must say, unfortunately, particularly the Nigerian Labour Congress has not paid so much attention to the welfare of the Nigerian worker. It's always been about minimum wage, minimum wage. And what we have seen over the years is a situation where inflation will always catch up with the minimum wage. And where when these workers are paid their salaries, they cannot even afford to pay for healthcare. They cannot even pay for the education of their children. They cannot even afford decent houses to live in. So I think these are major issues for implementation.
All right. In a case where a worker is fired or dismissed without prior notice, are there legal avenues for the worker to channel their grievances towards? And are there chances that the worker would get justice?
Yes. So there are, depending on what the contract of engagement is, and basically there are two types of contracts of engagement. There are engagements that are statutorily flavored, and particularly for civil servants. And majorly the relationship between employer and employee for civil servants is governed by the civil service rules and perhaps the letter of engagement. But when you have private organizations, it's basically the letter of engagement, and maybe if there are rules that the employee has also made within the organization to govern all of that. But what becomes important is that there are two words we use as lawyers. There's termination and there's dismissal. Usually when you have a letter of engagement, there are usually clauses on how both parties can terminate the engagement. And in most cases, maybe a month's notice or a salary in lieu. So if the employer decides to terminate and then follows what's in the clause in the engagement, it becomes a good termination. If the employee also does the same, it's okay. But there are always issues when it comes to dismissal, because dismissal usually come up because of maybe allegations against the employee. But what the law provides for, whether it is statutorily flavored or whether it's a contract of engagement, is that that employee must be given fair hearing. There must be a process of letting him or her know what the allegations against him are, and of also giving him fair hearing, giving him the opportunity to defend himself. And where there are criminal allegations, for instance, panels within those organizations may not be able to determine those crimes. it will have to be determined by court. Yeah, so fair hearing becomes very important in instances of dismissal. But for termination, either parties can terminate provided it's in accordance with their contract of engagement.
All right, so in all of this that we've gotten this morning, contract of engagements, looking out for clauses are very important as an employee in Nigeria, not just in the public sector, but also in private employees. Yeah. It was meant to be a very short segment because it was meant to be informative, and you have done justice to it. Thank you so much for joining us, Barrister.
Thank you very much for having me. And I wish all staff of Trust TV a happy Workers' Day. Thank
you very much for that. Indeed, a happy Workers' Day. I hope you've picked something from our conversation this morning. I would always say, get you a lawyer friend to look at that contract with you at every point in time. It could save your life. Well, we're going on a quick break. When we get back, it's time to take a look at stories that made it to the front pages of our dailies. Just stay.